right, welcome to the show, Jason. Man, it's good to have you, man. I'm going through your bio, and what an amazing background, amazing business you built, and I'm really looking forward to chopping it up and getting in deep and talking about it.
Thank you, Joe. It's good to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, give our guests a little bit of a background. I mean, look, I'm reading featured on Extreme Home Makeover, the Dr. Oz show, Good Morning America. I mean, dude, you've obviously climbed to the ranks, but take me back to a little bit back to the beginning, where it all started with this entire process first, before we get to that point.
Yeah, well, thanks again for having me on the show. I'm excited to be here. I got a chance to listen to some of your other podcasts and a very interesting conversation. So yeah, I'm excited. Sure. So this story, my story, the mold story. So I'm the founder of 1-800-GOT-MOLD, the mold inspection business, and also the creator of the Got Mold test kit. And so those businesses came out of an awareness or an awakening about my own childhood issues with respiratory illness. So it really does go back to the beginning, as you said. It all started really when I was about 4 years old. I suddenly lost about 30% of my body weight in a 3-week period. And my parents obviously were very concerned. They brought me to the pediatrician. He said, no, they need to go to, you need to go to Children's Hospital. And the initial diagnosis was cystic fibrosis, which was a death sentence at the time. And also it's a hereditary disease in my family. My father had lost 4 of his cousins before the age of 14 to CF. So they spent the next 6 weeks crying before the second opinion, which was thankfully that I had asthma compounded by pneumonia. And when they tested me for allergies, I was literally allergic to every single thing that they tested me for. My dad said I looked like a ladybug. They wrap you on a papu when you're a little kid. It's my first child, one of my formative memories. It's like a straitjacket, and they leave your back exposed, and they draw a grid on your back and test you for the antigens. My dad said I looked like a ladybug, just big red swollen with dots all over it, And but the interesting part about it was that I grew up on a small non-working farm, and I was allergic to grass, wheat, corn, eggs, dogs, cats, even cotton. And I was surrounded by all those things. We were surrounded by soybean fields and cornfields. I was allergic to both of them. Grass, cotton, so my clothing, my sheets. So needless to say, it was a rather uncomfortable childhood. And my parents both smoked. The awareness about that stuff was like zero back then. So sure. And so mold was certainly not on the radar. Cigarettes were still, it was still, it's just funny. But anyway, I moved out. My folks split up when I was about 12. Moved out of the house. All my symptoms went away. Never thought anything about it again because my grandfather had grown out of his asthma when he was adolescent, which is not uncommon. And so I just, moved through the world, but I had a really interesting childhood right around the age of 13. My mom died suddenly, and then by suicide, which turned out to be a very formative experience. It actually taught me optimism. And then shortly thereafter got Lyme disease, which put me on a round of thermonuclear antibiotics, which wiped out my gut. So caused me to have some chemical sensitivities and all sorts of other things. So it was kind of like mold, suicide, Lyme, boom, boom, boom. And then I was basically forced to drop out of high school. And so through a series of sort of incredible accidents, ended up meeting a guy at the gas station who recruited me to come work for him on Wall Street. So it's a total fairy tale. And I did that starting at age 16, literally gas station to Wall Street, jeans to suit and tie in a matter of a week. And I did that for about 9 years, and I had a really great career. And it just happened to be something that was suitable for my personality. It just happened to be that this kid from the gas station that happened to work for me. And I really enjoyed it, but I lacked purpose. That was my big thing, is that my mom had raised me to contribute to the greater good, and she did so to a fault. That's actually one of her undoings. But the positive part of that was something that really made an impression on me, which is, if you improve the quality of other people's lives, the natural byproduct of that is the quality of your life improves. And so that was embedded in me as a child. And yet on Wall Street, I struggled deeply with this contradiction. There's just, the only people that benefited from my success on Wall Street were the people who owned the stores where I worked.
It's kind of counterintuitive to what you do on Wall Street, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And so I had been frustrated with all of that. And finally, after the dot-com bubble burst, I decided I wanted to do something meaningful with my life, and I went backpacking for a while. This is right around September 11th. And so I kept it pretty domestic. And while I was in Hawaii, I was living on the beach and in youth hostels. I was still young. I had a little bit of money, but I was, really enjoying some time off. I didn't do the college thing like a lot of my friends did. So I was taking my time reading a lot local newspapers and stuff. And I read about a guy who'd gotten sick from working in a hotel where there was a major mold problem. I didn't realize it at the time, but it was the biggest mold problem in modern history. There was the Hilton Kalia Tower, which is the flagship property in Oahu. It's the big building on Waikiki Beach with the rainbow on it. Everybody, it's in postcards. That had been shut down for a mold problem that they initially thought was pretty localized to a small area. But as they began opening the walls, it was like Pandora's box. It went from a $500,000 problem to a $5 million problem to a $55 million mold problem. And while I was there, this is big news. It was big international news in the real estate world, but it was also big news locally because people were talking about how it affected them. And this one guy who was in his 40s was interviewed, and he had developed adult onset asthma and sensitivities to all these foods and things that he had never been sensitive to before. And it was like a light bulb went on for me. It was like a deja vu moment in a way, where I suddenly was brought back to my own childhood. And I thought, man, I had kind of the opposite, where I wonder if mold was the issue for me. I wonder if we had a problem. So I went to a payphone, which isn't probably there anymore, and called my father and said, "Hey, do you think we had a mold problem?" And he laughed at me. He said, "Of course we had mold. We had mushrooms in the basement." And it was so flippant. Like, it's just, of course we did. And I said, "Well, do you think that was the underlying? Do you think that was why I was sick?" And he said, "Well, it certainly didn't help." Like, again, it was just this like, basements have mold. That's just the way people think about it. What does it smell like? It smells like a basement. That's the way people used to talk about this subject. It's different now. And so this is 20 years ago, right? So this is I got into this before people were really talking about it, before it was in the headlines for sure. Hurricane Katrina and some other things certainly, cemented it into our our collective mindsets. But I got immediately interested in that. What I got interested in was not mold per se, but actually how buildings impact people's health. And I started looking at this saying, we spend so much of our time indoors, and I've recent statistics are we've spent 90% of our time at least indoors, if you include transportation, sometimes more. And we worry so much about the outdoor environment, outdoor air pollution, but take very little consideration into our indoor environment, where we have a lot of control. We have zero control of the outdoor environment in our very infinitesimal way, but indoors we truly have control over these environmental factors: the quality of the air you breathe, the water you drink, the food you eat, shelter being, of course, a basic human need as well. That's where we have a locus of control, and the fact that we don't exert that control, I think is a bit of a travesty. And so my job is through Got Mold, and I'll tell you how we got here. But our job is to give people the tools and knowledge they need to make better decisions about the air they breathe. And so I got interested in this space from Hawaii, flew back to New Jersey, armed with curiosity, took a job working for a mold remediation company, this Wall Street to mold, right? And took a job for a remediation company to understand what they were actually doing, and quickly saw what they were doing was ineffective and oftentimes harmful. They were using chemicals for treatments for mold cleanup instead of actually cleaning the mold. Oftentimes using that as a substitute instead, so leaving behind a house with mold and chemicals. And so I saw an opportunity to create a company that would protect the consumer from that kind of stuff. Lead paint, asbestos, all these environmental hazards have a Chinese wall, if you will, where there's an inspector and a remediator. And these two things are in many cases legally separated. What we did was we went in and said, okay, well, I'm going to create an inspection company because eventually there'll be legislation about this. And sure enough, there is. And in every state where there's legislation, they divide those two. So we created a mold inspection company to guide the consumer through this process, to protect them from the contractors, do the testing at the end, make sure they got what they paid for before they pay for it. And through that company, actually, we began using mold sniffing dogs, which is really what put us on the map. We had specially trained Labrador retrievers trained to sniff out the hidden mold in buildings. And that's actually what got us onto Good Morning America and Extreme Makeover Home Edition and thousands of newspapers and magazines. I mean, really, it's incredible. We've never advertised. And our phone has been ringing and ringing and ringing. And really, it's based upon the fact that we have this no conflict of interest. We go into homes, we figure out what's going on. We get most of our referrals from doctors through 1-800-GOT-MOLD. And then we guide them through the process. And the stories of healing have been profound. But to wrap it up, where we are today, we over the years realized that our inspection business, as satisfying as it is, and it's afforded me a comfortable lifestyle. It's also I realized that we had created a high-end service business, which was cost prohibitive for my parents could not have afforded to hire my company, right? So I created this to help parents and families avoid having to go through what my family did, and yet I created something that was out of reach in terms of cost. And so that always bothered me. And so a number of years ago, we began putting the pieces of the puzzle together to create a very high quality do-it-yourself test kit, which would use the same device the professionals use, but without any of the cost or hassle associated with finding and hiring a qualified professional. And so that's what we did. So at gotmold.com, we've just made them available to the public. You can now test the air in up to 3 rooms using the same devices the professionals use for a fraction of the cost. And so it's a very exciting time. And so the best part is my parents could have afforded this. My parents could have afforded this and probably would have purchased this if they had thought mold might be an issue. My kid is sick. What's the first step? And I kept thinking about them in the creation of it and thinking, how could I close this loop? And so that's what brought me here today.
Man. Well, you give a podcast host a lot to work with. I'll tell you that. I mean, I got a whole page full of notes. First of all, I got this one sheet in front of me with your bio, and man, they got to update this because the background you gave me, doesn't exactly match up with what my notes say in front of me. We go from, being poked and prodded as a kid with massive allergies, and I'm not even going to try to guess your age, but I feel like we're pretty similar in age. And the interesting thing is, like, nobody had allergies when we were kids. Like nobody had allergies, and for you to be allergic to everything, it's pretty telling, obviously, that you were in some kind of environment that was obviously, sparking up something for you. And you're right. When we were kids, like everything had mold on it. Like I remember, you'd walk into your bathroom and you had mold around the top of the shower, and nobody cared when we were kids. Like everyone just you had mold everywhere. Your basement was covered in mold. I remember my grandmother's basement when I grew up was that type of basement that you're talking about. It was like a cellar. You would only walk down there to, whatever. I mean, it was gross. It was moldy. It was, it's just what it is, what it was. And I'm sure it made us all sick. She had one of those houses in Jersey that was 150 years old, and it was a wet basement, right? But you're right. We don't think about these things now the way we thought about them 30, 40 years ago, right? When we were growing up as kids.
Different level of awareness about all these things. Think about tap water, right? Or just think about water in general, what people are used to, or quality of food. There wasn't an organic grocery store at all when we were kids, right? Organic, what's organic? I mean, really, the term is even fairly new. So we've gone through, our society has gone through this really interesting, I was thinking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where the top is this self-actualization. And what's cool about this, the industry that we're in, is that we tend to serve people that are thinking, they're optimizing their lives, and they're finally taking action on something like air, which is this thing that's it's literally hiding right under the tip of your nose, but yet you don't think about it. You realize you breathe 22,000 times a day. How many of those are conscious? How many of those are you actually thinking about, or are you aware of? Very few, if any, unless you're having a difficult time with it, unless you touch, unless you taste or smell something that you don't want, or that you don't have enough air, then you just think about it a lot. And so, it's a tricky thing selling air awareness, which is what we do. But I think we're doing this at a time when people are becoming more aware of this. COVID has certainly brought a lot of attention to air quality, and also the indoor environment, since so many of us since we're all locked up for so long. But there's also this funny thing. It's just this kind of last frontier of environmental awareness, because toilets is where it starts. All developed nations start with toilets. Undeveloped, no toilets. Developed, toilets.
Sure. And
then you got food. Food awareness is the first big, and then water, right? Clean water, and then the fresher, more natural water. Air is the last one, right? It's the thing that you need the most, but you think about the least. But yet our society as waking up to that. And if you follow the hierarchy of needs all the way up to the top, and you get the air, you realize when you have a problem with air, you go right back to the bottom, because it's survival. It's an amazing dynamic around environmental awareness, air in particular, and the timing for this is very exciting. It's a great time to be in this space.
One of the things that you said that really resonated with me big time, because I grew up in the construction industry. We develop self-storage now, but I mean, for over a decade, we flipped houses. We flipped 1,000 properties, and so we had our hands in the residential space, development space, for a very long time. And what you said that really hit home for me was that we cannot control any percentage of the exterior of the outside environment, right? But when we're inside, people don't realize we have 100% control. Now, we might not have the technology We might not have the resources or, in the abundance of money to do whatever we want with the inside. But what are some things that just about anybody can do, aside from, just going and changing your air filters, obviously? But like, what are some things? I mean, obviously, I love the idea of this got mold test kit, right? So what are maybe some? Let's start out with this. What are some obvious ideas where people probably need to test for? And then, what are the next steps that they need to go into if the test comes back? And what does the test tell us, I guess, basically?
Well, so when I think about, we're in the healthy home business as much as we are in the mold business, and I look at this much more holistically, in the sense that there's evidence that respiratory illness in America is actually down. I'm sorry, the all causes of respiratory illness are down. For example, smoking and things like that. But yet morbidity associated with respiratory illness is up 30% since 1965. And so you have to wonder, if all the contributors to respiratory illness are down, why are we getting more sick and more severely sick? And my friends who are in this space, in fact, I had this conversation last night at 9 o'clock with the former president of the Indoor Air Quality Association. We believe that there's chronic Voc exposure. So the gases that come off of building materials and finishes and furnishings and things like that are predominant. Of course, anything that's made quickly, which almost everything is these days. Anything with a veneer on it is made with glue, and anything from, I shouldn't say I keep it, any of the pressboard products, right? These things are all anyway, they're off gassing.
But to be fair, new construction, everything is made that way now, right? We used to have solid hardwood floors. Now we have laminate hardwood floors. We used to have solid hardwood cabinets. Now we have laminate cabinets. Everything is laminated, pressed, quick.
Fake.
It's fake. Yeah, exactly.
Fake. Right. So we've gone away from all this stuff. And what we've done is we've created chemical house. And by the way, we've tightened up our buildings for energy efficiency. And we also pack our walls with insulation with formaldehyde in it. This is a class 1 carcinogen. Why it's legal in our great nation to build buildings out of materials that off-gas carcinogens is beyond me. It's one of my missions in life, is to get that. There's no reason. It's a common sense thing. You can pull anybody on the street and they'll say, what? Why? And it's because there's you're innocent until proven guilty, even if you're a corporation in America. And so unless you want to spend the money to prove that they're guilty, guess what? It's going to happen until it happens, until someone steps up. So mold is something that's highly actionable because it's an acute thing. It's something you have a moisture issue, you have a smell. So what I always say is you use your senses. First thing you do is, do you see something, smell something, or feel something? Do you see something, blistering paint? You're looking for anything, any indication of moisture, staining, trim pulling away from walls. These are the dead giveaways, right? If you smell something, that musty odor, or any chemical odor, by the way, this is a really important issue. The new house smell is the beautiful smell of cancer. Seriously. I mean, I can be as blunt as you can be, but that's the bottom line. The new car smell, similarly, like Pavlov's dogs, we've associated success to these smells, but that's a function of neurological training. We've trained ourselves to do this. That is not. It's just like the gasoline, the smell of gasoline at the gas station smells good, but we all know that's not. It's the same kind of thing. There's an allure to it. VOCs are very perfume. VOCs. I just read an article today about they did a really interesting study on moisturizers and the VOCs from the scent of skin products causes incredible amounts of exposure. So your face is off gassing, right? So the bottom line is that fragrances, whether they're artificial or natural, in many cases are concentrating indoors, causing problems. Moisture issues are the first thing you want to look for because you can take action on that right away. You have 24 to 48 hours to react to a moisture problem before it becomes a mold problem. And a moisture problem is cheap or free to deal with. A mold problem is expensive. And so what we want to do is we want to be very vigilant about moisture problems. That's the first thing. In terms, so see something, smell something, or feel something. Feel something is symptoms, right? So headaches are a dead giveaway. Fatigue, difficulty concentrating, any upper respiratory thing, anything that goes away when you leave the house. That's a big, right? So if you see something, smell something, or feel something, do something. And I always say trust your instincts, but then get the facts. So you want to do things like test. You want to do things like collect air samples using a got mold test kit. There's another great sample collection device or a test kit made by a company called Prism Analytical, homeaircheck.com. And they do VOC testing. So if you're concerned about chemicals in your house, that's a great test too. You want to get humidity gauges in your house. ideally they've got remote sensors. You can put them in places like crawl spaces and out places that are out of sight, out of mind. You want to keep humidity above 40%, but below 60%. This is very important. Above 60%, you get condensation and mold and dust mites and all sorts of allergens start to proliferate. Below 40%, you get dried sinuses, dried mucous membranes, and your critters can get into you that way. And that's why people get sick in the winter. It's not so much because there's more bugs, it's because they're susceptible due to dried mucous membranes.
Sure.
And so the bottom line is when you've identified, when you start to quantify this around your house and you've got your senses engaged, then you start looking at what you can do in terms of mechanical things that will improve your air quality. You mentioned furnace filters, which are truly designed to keep the mechanical equipment clean, to keep the fan and the blower clean, the coils, things like that. What you want to do is get air purifiers. And there's a big difference between a filter and a purifier. And specifically, you want to get the standalone air units. There's some great companies out there. Healthway is a great one. Medify is another great one. We used to recommend IQ Air units, but lately the company has kind of done a turn. Still great units. Don't necessarily support some of their other things, but there's some great air purifiers out there. What you want to look for is true HEPA, which means it's a sealed unit. And that removes 99.75% of all particles, 0.3 microns and up. And what that means is it takes all the little tiny stuff out. Ideally, you want to get something that's also got activated carbon. The problem is that gets saturated, so you have to change those out on a regular basis. But the activated carbon will remove odors and VOCs. A good air purifier will take out particles and gases. If you're just taking out the particles, you're missing half or more of the pollutants. And the other thing is ventilation. Open your windows. Obviously you can't do it when it's hot or super humid or super cold, but you want to get ventilation in your house. What I'm really encouraging people to do, and this is sort of a summary, is to recognize that your building is a function of your immune system. Think about this. It's an exoskin, an exoskeleton, if you will. It's a filter. It protects you from all these things. And we actually, in many ways, have kind of a symbiotic relationship with our buildings. If you don't take care of your building, it will develop aches and pains. It will develop moisture problems. It will develop mold. It will make you sick. That you fix the building gets better, you get better. It's a symbiotic relationship. It's a mutualism, if you will. And so I'm really encouraging people to consider that this building, which is a basic human need, is not just a box that we store our stuff in and that we live and work in. It's actually truly a relationship that you have to have with the structure. And if you do that, then you really make your house your home, and you make your home your health. And if you do that, then you've done something really great for yourself and for your family and for the next people who live in your house, because that tends to be the legacy. Talk about legacy builder. You leave behind a legacy for the next people that have your home to take care of as well.
I love it, Jason. I don't think there's a better way to cap it off besides that. I mean, what's your big goal? Where do you want to see this? Where do you want to see Got Mold go? What's the big goal in the next 3 to 5 years?
We're working on a couple of devices that would actually be early. That would be basically a mold sensor that would send alerts to your email or to your phone if the conditions that are conducive to mold growth are protected. So what we're really trying to do here, Joe, is this. Okay, we live on a water planet. We all live in buildings. We all breathe air. Everyone always asks me, who's your demographic? The people who live on a water planet that live in buildings and breathe air. That's who we serve, right? It just so happens that many people happen to, have an event that brings their awareness to mold. My goal is to wake up the population to realize that mold is a fact of life. You're never gonna, if you haven't had a mold problem yet, just wait. It's inevitable. It's up there with death and taxes. I just want people to be prepared about it, because all of the diseases that are caused by or aggravated by mold are preventable. That's the reality. Unlike so many of these other diseases that you may be genetic or what have you, this is an environmental exposure issue that you can both prevent and also correct quickly if you have the wherewithal and if you stop looking on Facebook for your answers, which is, so you have to know where to ask. But the bottom line is we're about raising awareness. So in the next 3 to 5 years, if Got Mold is a national brand name, a recognizable brand name, then I think we will have done our job to raise awareness about the subject matter.
Yeah, I mean, it's a no-brainer to me. I mean, you got smart homes now. We got everything connected to Bluetooth. If you create a device like that, I mean, I already have the humidistats that you're talking about for water, seepage in the basement. I mean, all these things. I can imagine a mold sensor plugging right in. You know, the way people care about their health nowadays, and everyone's wearing a smartwatch and a tracker. There's really no reason why that doesn't tap into the whole ecosystem. So I wish you luck with it. I see it happening. So what's the best way for our listeners to get a hold of you, Jason? I know you were talking about creating some ability for them to get the kit, for them to actually tap into the Got Mold system and be able to service their homes with this as well.
Yeah, so actually for your listeners, we created a special welcome page at gotmold.com. It's a /legacy builder. So it's gotmold.com/legacy builder. And there we have a special discounted link for 10% off of any of our test kits. And also a copy of an ebook. I don't even know if do people still, that feels so 1999 ebook. But it's a 45-page guide that we put together. No strings attached. No, it's not a sales document in any way. It's actually filled with inspection checklists and all sorts of really good practical stuff, some FAQs. And we get a lot of positive feedback on that. So we always suggest that if people have questions about mold, check that first before Facebook.
There you go. There you have it. So keep your family safe. Go in there, get the FAQ, get yourself a mold test kit if you have any questions whatsoever about whether or not your home has mold. And I'm sure on the website, you can figure out how to take it to the next step if you need to. So Jason, Earle, thanks for being on the show, brother. I appreciate it. Great show.
Thank you, Joe.